The Undertaker's reputation by the end of the 90s was a reputation few achieve in the wrestling industry. The Undertaker had wrestled for 10 years with the WWF, and 10 years today seems like nothing, but back then it was an incredible accomplishment, and through it, The Undertaker evolved from a dead cowboy to the personification of evil. In between, he did some normal behavior, but it didn't seem like he would fully adapt and change his character. But it came from out of nowhere, and after his return in 2000, he was the American Badass. It was a significant change because it forced The Undertaker to become a character that was entirely different to who he was for 10 years. It also benefited him as a fresh start and perhaps even be himself. It seemed unlikely he would revert to the dead man persona, however it was waiting for him with open arms, and it was basically a cheat code to make money. Do I personally think he needed to go back to the dead man? Not really. He already had a successful career up to this point, and I'm sure he would have done well, especially because of his improvements in ring. 2003 was up to this point his best in-ring year, and it helped greatly he was in there with the likes of Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle, not some random big guy. And he was enjoying this run. It was what he wanted, and had no plans of even returning to the dead man. So when WWE discussed the idea of him potentially reverting to the dead man, he didn't like it. And I quote, Mark Calloway hated the idea, absolutely hated the idea of coming back as the dead man because he thought with the American Badass character, he was multi-dimensional and he wasn't doing the head snaps and everything. He could work and go out and have a different style of match, and he felt that if he came back as the dead man, that he would have to go back to that dead man persona in the ring. We all felt, look, let's give them that at WrestleMania, the dead man, but then you can involve in the ring with your work, you can work like the American Badass, but you're the Undertaker. You're in your old garb. It was a battle. It was a multi-month battle to really convince him that this would work, and he didn't think that people wanted the dead man back. He really didn't. He just wanted to continue on with the American Badass and felt that it was a step back to go to the old Undertaker. I could say a lot of begging, but it was a constant dialogue of, we could do this, and he would come up with, what if I'm presented with this situation? How would this Undertaker react? We worked through all of that, and it took a while, but we said, take this time off, grow your hair out, and if it completely a bed and the audience is like, now we don't like it, then we can always go back. He's like, damn, you can't go back. Yes, you can. We're gonna try it out. Finally, he just gave in and said, okay, I'll try it, I'll do it. The rest, as they say, is history. So convincing Undertaker in itself was a tough task, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. He was buried alive by his own brother Kane in Survivor Series and disappeared. In the following weeks, the Undertaker wasn't around, and Kane moved on like nothing was going on until the Royal Rumble when the return of the dead man was teased. Kane made it seem like he was unfazed, but his behavior in general was telling a different story. Over the next couple of weeks, Kane was the victim of strange occurrences that confirmed the Undertaker was back to being the dead man and wanted to face his brother at WrestleMania 20. The Undertaker's return here was simply one of the most iconic in wrestling history, and what makes it so good is that WrestleMania was back home and it was connecting with its own roots. Madison Square Garden. Same situation for The Undertaker, not to mention Paul Bearer's return howling, oh yeah. The Undertaker in all his glory once again embraced his true nature, although that cowboy hat was kind of goofy. His brother was distraught and emotional throughout this entire thing, and match-wise, I can't tell you much about it, but no doubt this match was memorable. It contradicts itself, but the reason why it's memorable comes down to the return of the Dead Man. Taker winning here is as obvious as a Kevin Nash match. We know what's up. The Dead Man's plans after WrestleMania were supposed to involve Brock Lesnar. It was supposed to slay the Beast, which makes sense because 1, Taker did the same for him, and 2, the return to his old character needs some demonstration of how strong he is. So they gotta go with some money. That's how it goes. Lesnar was burnt out and didn't enjoy the plans post-WrestleMania, and there's a reason why he lost the title to Eddie Guerrero. It was to move him on and I assume rebuild him for a match against Triple H at WrestleMania 21. It's a big rumor at the time. Later that week on SmackDown, The Undertaker appeared after the main event, and this was after Paul Heyman was demanding respect from Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. And they showed great respect by feeding him to The Undertaker, who was donning a bandana. So they're trying to show you that Undertaker's back. At the same time, however, Booker T was lacking. Now why Booker T? Well, we're gonna get to it in a minute. But long story short, his attitude went from very outspoken, confident, excited, to some depressed loner on SmackDown. He hated being traded to SmackDown, but it was growing on him, and before he knew it, The Undertaker was knocking on his door. He did this again the following week, but this time he was in person, and this was after Booker T claimed that he'll slap the dead out of The Undertaker. Such a very dumb claim was going to be put to the test. Booker T's misfortunes caused him to go off the deep end. He visited a psychic. She gave him a very descriptive and daunting telling of his future, and it's of course related to The Undertaker, and the 5-time champion was very curious about this and was looking for ways to put a stop. The woman gave him a list of things to do, including visiting the graveyard for some dirt, and this was all to prevent what was to pass. The Undertaker meanwhile destroyed the FBI. Booker's pursuit of this certain grave was tough, but the unmarked grave found him. He made it out quick, but found himself lucky. Man, I love these segments from this era of WWE. It showed that there was some things beyond the squared circle, and the story in general is, of course, silly. It's kind of bizarre. It's like, what the hell? But it's interesting. Booker T was carrying that dirt around thinking he was solving the problem, and this man was convinced that he had it figured out because he beat 67 overall Nunzio and 54 overall Johnny Stamboli. But Booker was in for a reality check. The Undertaker and Paul Bearer popped up, and that confidence that was radiating off of him faded like his push in 2003. This man was doing all kinds of rituals. He was following every religion out there to even get a chance to overpower the Undertaker. Paul Bearer told him that this is his judgment day, and Taker just said rest in peace. It was easy business for him. Booker T's hard work was going to be put to the test. The match itself was very dry, but it was a way of establishing that the Undertaker is still one of the most powerful men out there. Hell, even more than he was in the past. Booker tried using that dirt, but he accomplished nothing. He had resorted to his usual tactics, which got him far, but not far enough, and this was going to end only one way, with the Undertaker victorious. He had one of his most underrated tombstones here to score the victory and move on to a storyline that was stranger than this Booker T thing, which was strange in itself. Now, around this time period, WWE saw the Undertaker as an attraction. That's why he wasn't appearing often on TV. He'd show up to house shows though. With that said, on the May 27, 2004 episode of SmackDown, the Dudley Boys decided to abduct Paul Bearer, and Paul Heyman retrieved the urn. The urn is believed to hold the power within the Undertaker, and symbolically, literally, Paul Heyman had all the power in his hands, forcing the Undertaker to follow his commands. For Taker, it's easy to grab him and give him a beating, but it would come at Paul Bearer's expense. So Heyman wanted the Undertaker to join him and the Dudleys. The duo thought this was a foregone conclusion, feeling that the dead man would come to his senses, but Heyman didn't see it that way, because there was a reason why nobody tested the Undertaker like this. To try and take the one who's closest to him would probably result in a disastrous situation. At the end of the night, he came out and was full of confidence. His attitude was certainly different early on, but Heyman was a man of faith. Sure, he had his doubts, but it was time to find out. There was a sense of confidence because this was a tough situation for Taker, so Heyman's wish was basically granted. Undertaker went on his knee and bowed before Paul Heyman, who with the help of the Dudleys devising a brave plan of abducting Paul Bearer, has become the most powerful man in the WWE. Heyman elaborated further on this the following week, talking about how he controls the conscience of the Undertaker, Paul Bearer. Undertaker's weakness is feeling for Paul Bearer, which was his benefit. He then booked a handicap match for Great American Bash, the Undertaker against the Dudleys, and talked about the cement truck and how Taker will do the right thing and bury Paul Bearer. WWE was really messing with the budget here. Like, what is this? Heyman promised that Undertaker will do the right thing and wanted to put him to the test tonight. He proceeded to destroy a bunch of mid-carders who were cosplaying his main eventers because SmackDown was so light at the time. Then he bowed for Heyman again, showing that he will go to any lengths to protect Paul Bearer. This attack seemed to have done a number on the roster, who were absolutely perplexed and worried over things. So at this point, it was a question of who's going to step up. John Cena. Charlie Haas told him that if he wants to go out there, it's suicide. I don't think Charlie Haas is aware of the power that John Cena could summon from being Super Cena. He went out there and called out the Undertaker. Kurt Angle is a world-class hitter at this point, not to mention GM, so he booked John Cena to go one-on-one with the Undertaker. I guess this is where Teddy Long took inspiration to make it his own thing. They had one hell of a match, especially considering this was 2004 John Cena. It's not out of this world, but I think it could be in a top 10 SmackDown match up to that point. With that said, it was a nice test for John Cena to wrestle at the highest level with the most respected figure in WWE. Ironically, The Undertaker cheated to win here with the chain. Nonetheless, it was a standout from John Cena's early career. It set him up nicely to face these guys because it was only going to be regular business from here on. As for The Undertaker, the handicap match main evented, which was very questionable. However, it involved a big spot, so there's that. The match was Paul Bearer being slowly buried in the concrete and Undertaker refusing to lay down, which wasn't doing Paul Bearer any favors. The match was very boring and no doubt about it has to be the worst main event for a WWE pay-per-view that year. There's no beating around the bush, and this was following a very good JBL Eddie Guerrero match. The rules were almost complicated since Undertaker didn't want to lose, but if he won, he lost. So basically, it was a lose-lose situation. The action itself is not noteworthy, otherwise we'd be talking about it right now. But Heyman had Undertaker in a chokehold. Even though he won the match, he wanted to do the right thing, but a lightning bolt prevented him, and instead the Undertaker, with no other choice, followed through with it, telling his friend to rest in peace. And so Undertaker basically killed him. Okay, number one, I'm sure you remember seeing an old rehearsal video involving this segment on YouTube back in the day. It was like one of the most popular wrestling videos at the time. I don't know, I feel like if you were growing up in that era, you definitely saw on YouTube for sure, or somewhere else. Number two, they managed to work with Paul Bearer using a pre-tape. Another guy was in place for this one, but about the story itself, it was really building up to be something huge, because with Paul Heyman towering over the Undertaker, it had to go even further, especially after the Paul Bearer incident. A report in June of 2004 stated, it looks like the Undertaker's new alliance with Paul Heyman and the Dudley Boys could go on longer than we thought. The WWE is seriously considering turning the Undertaker heel so that he could be the next challenger to Latino Heat Eddie Guerrero's WWE Championship. If the company does decide to go through with the plan, the two could headline SummerSlam against each other as the main event for the SmackDown brand. However, once the Guerrero program is finished, there's a chance that the Undertaker could return to being a face so he could feud with Heyman and the Dudley Boys. Okay, that would have been big. Certainly bigger than JBL and Undertaker's match because Eddie was already established, and in addition, it would give a logical direction after the Paul Bearer thing. because Paul Heyman was looking for global domination, and what better way than having the tag team champions by his side and the next WWE champion. Later that week on SmackDown, Paul Heyman explained The Undertaker's actions. He spoke about how the only thing preventing the dead man from dominating was his personal feelings for Paul Bearer. Now, he has no conscience, no restraints, and he's going to be more dangerous, all thanks to him. Suddenly, lightning strikes, and Undertaker says that his manager was a weakness for him, but also said that if he could do that to the only person he cared for, what would he do to Heyman himself? This stressed him out to the point where he issued a formal apology in his efforts to cooling down the dead man, even placed the blame on the Dudleys. He didn't want forgiveness, just a pass. Bro managed to turn himself into a victim after commanding death upon another. Undertaker seemed to have spared him for the time being in order to focus on another thing. Now, the story had a lot going for it. Sure, that main event match was bad, but The Undertaker killing Paul Bearer is supposed to be much bigger than the way that they made it out to be, because they just left the storyline as it was. But apparently it was The Undertaker who had a problem with it. Yeah, the story could have gone ways, probably would have sucked, but I don't understand why they didn't see it through. They had to involve Heyman later on. Well, that's a different story. On the July 22nd, 2004 episode of SmackDown, The Undertaker responded to JBL's claims of not wrestling at SummerSlam. Of course, he's the exception. JBL was strong but very restrained in his approach, even said that he was booked in a match against Shannon Moore for the title. He gave The Undertaker the count of 3 to leave, and it was a funny moment. This thing didn't end well for Bradshaw, and The Undertaker made his intentions clear. SummerSlam, and since he had the Teddy Long pass, the match was official. JBL at this point wanted to rebound in a big way. His championship reign was being threatened by The Undertaker, and so he wanted to bounce back. So he called out the budget version of The Undertaker, who Taz called the Under-Toddler. So Undertaker was here, but the stats were included. He was having a little too much fun at his own expense, because out of all the people to save him at this point, it had to be Orlando Jordan. As expected, JBL portrayed himself to be a fighting champion, somebody who shows zero fear and claimed that he had plans to exploit Undertaker's weaknesses. As for Orlando Jordan, JBL made him his new chief of staff. JBL is being built up as this very strong heel, not in the sense of a fighting champion, but somebody that would come out on top in any type of situation. He had help from Eddie, and since he was liked by a bunch of the veterans, The Undertaker followed up. It was a tough situation. When you look at it, it's like, hey, this guy's a random tag team guy. According to Bruce Pritchard, Undertaker was willing to put over JBL clean to help him establish his heel character. The match itself was very plotting. Last time I watched it, damn, wasn't long. 17 minutes, but it felt like double than that. I think WWE would be wiser to pace this differently nowadays. Bradshaw didn't really win it here. He won it by DQ after the ref noticed Taker blasting him with a belt, and what followed was pure anarchy and carnage that left JBL battered and destroyed. This man came out wearing his head over the neck brace, wherever the hell this is, and he said that he had a dream to beat The Undertaker 1, 2, 3, but he robbed him of his glory by bringing in the title to the ring. JBL tried to paint himself as a victim of odd circumstances, and after this miserable promo where he's whining, complaining, he got tough and promised that Undertaker will never get a rematch. That's what he deserves, even guaranteed that he'll never become WWE champion again, and JBL was correct. Now, his statement of never getting a rematch wasn't his choice to make, and once again, this situation was goofy. It was a tough thing for JBL, and to top it all off, he left the one thing most desired by the dead man. From here, it wasn't going to get any better. He was getting his ass beat, his neck brace taken away, and Teddy Long booked the last ride match for the WWE Championship. This forced him to adapt and rethink his strategy. He decided to call out The Undertaker. Why? Because he wanted to prove he's a great champion. The chief of staff didn't want this to go down, but JBL wouldn't budge. The champion was ready for a fight, and Undertaker was like, no problem. Bradshaw felt that this was a fight for him to deal with, not Orlando, and so he took a beating. But then Gangrel and Viscera popped up to jump him. This attack almost went awry as JBL's hired guns proved that they were no more than jobbers. He had to hit a clothesline from hell to turn things around, and it was finally working. JBL's plan had come together, which was to isolate The Undertaker and give himself an advantage heading into No Mercy. But this would flip on its head in a moment, because this wasn't no skill-based matchmaking type thing. Undertaker destroyed them with ease. He eradicated them for good, one by one. Gangrel, Viscera, Jordan, and all that was left was JBL. Bradshaw was desperate to make a statement ahead of this, but it was clearly overshadowed by Orlando's sacrifice. JBL at this point, he was collapsing like Manchester United. The build for the match was stronger than SummerSlam, no doubt about it. Undertaker was shown to have more venom and sharpness in his approach after JBL sidetracked him. He channeled his own ministry persona, and if you were reading the dirt sheets at the time, you obviously knew what was going to go down, but they showed that he had a great chance, especially with the last ride stipulation, so yeah. The match was extremely one-sided with The Undertaker dominating. JBL was humbled and demoralized, and sure, he had his moments here and there, but the edge was most definitely with The Undertaker. Out of everyone to save JBL, it was Heyman. His distraction gave JBL the opening to throw him in the hearse and retain the title. It was revealed that Paul Heyman was riding the hearse and Heyman ended up driving his car into it. This, of course, would result in minor scratches to The Undertaker. He was like a character from GTA or a cartoon, except he responds in the arena. Teddy Long informed Heyman of this news, telling him that when they opened up that hearse, nobody was to be found. I mean, Teddy Long's relationship is clear. Why wouldn't he know secrets of the unknown? He was talking like Undertaker returning was a foregone conclusion, which it was. Heyman was trying to assure himself that Heyman was this guy that feared nothing, and it was a one once again, it was a big guy feud to try and get him over. Now, Heyman's character at the time was that he was a psycho who knew no limits. He was reading poetry from the top of the stage, assaulted a fan, and I don't even want to talk about the Michael Cole incident. They were really going all out with him. Heyman's erratic, predatorial behavior was certainly not doing him favors, and in the case of assaulting fans, he was forced to apologize. Regarding The Undertaker, Heyman challenged him to a fight, but The Undertaker didn't appear, and instead of hurting somebody, he hurt himself. This got to the point where Paul Heyman asked Teddy Long for Heyman to face The Undertaker, but he wanted a signed contract from The Undertaker himself. 1 week to get the signature. The meeting itself was not pleasant. Heyman was talking a lot, but Taker wasn't listening. He signed, but reminded him of the Paul Bearer situation and how he gave him a pass. The Undertaker said that signing this contract wasn't for a match, it was for the execution of Heyman. He finally confronted him on the final SmackDown before Survivor Series. Heyman wasn't overwhelmed and was ready to fight, but Heyman knew where the momentum lied. The build was mostly about showcasing who Heyman was rather than The Undertaker. He was only involved in 2 segments, and one of them was backstage. The match itself was not memorable, and the problem comes down to the fact that Heyman was extremely green. This man was not capable of having a 7-minute match, let alone a 15-minute match. But that's what happened here, and the match was hurt because of it. But it seemed like the feud was over and Undertaker was moving on because he beat him decisively. Not to mention, he set his sights on the most coveted gold once again, the WWE Championship. Heyman, meanwhile, was losing himself, so he decided to cost The Undertaker the title in the most important moment at Armageddon. Great match, though. It was a standout from JBL's title reign and the best Undertaker match since his return to the Dead Man character. Also, one of the only times Latino Heat interacted with this version of The Undertaker, so it was good. You had Booker T, JBL, Undertaker, and Eddie Guerrero in there. No disqualification for the title in the main event. Why wouldn't it be a good match? It was great. I loved it. It was awesome. Heyman was fearless. He saw death but came back for more, and even challenged The Undertaker to a match at the Royal Rumble and was convinced that he feared nothing. Now, lights go out and Taker tells him that his final resting place is in a casket. Last party showed him Heyman was in absolute disbelief, and it was clear that the edge was with The Undertaker. Man was calling for God at this point. He was so scared, so worried over the stipulation that he managed to get a handicap match with Paul Heyman to receive a chance to change it. So if they win, they get to change the stipulation. This was horrible for the duel. Undertaker brought out 2 caskets, so Heyman made a run for it, leading to Heyman taking the beating. Heading into the Royal Rumble, Heyman received the sign of his future. He was out here reading poems and some bizarre stuff. He's yelling, talking about his fear of caskets, and he's spitting some white stuff. I don't know what the hell that is. I don't want to know as well. But that was the build. It was leaning towards the Undertaker victory because, well, Heyman was asking for it. It was close to WrestleMania, and there was just no chance of him winning here. The match at the Royal Rumble was very dull, but there was a big moment where Kane saved his brother from Heyman and Snitsky. It was a nice moment, and with the way the story was going, there was only one way it was going to end, with the Undertaker victorious, and that's exactly what happened here. Match was dull, but hey, the story's over. Undertaker gets to finally move on. So there's that. He had a mini feud with Luther Reigns afterwards, which wasn't much, honestly. If it was much, I honestly would have spoke about it in detail here, but there's not much about it. And from there, it was the Randy Orton feud. So yeah. Okay, that's the Undertaker's first year as the Dead Man once again. Opponent-wise, it was all over the place, you know? Like, it wasn't Undertaker at his very best. Some people really thought he was washed at this point, which is crazy, especially what we've seen later on. But here, you know, like, there wasn't many good matches. Character work, great. Undertaker as the Dead Man, he was a draw. Everyone was interested in him. And the way they treated him, having him come out not every week, every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, made him feel like a bigger deal than he was. He was a star attraction, the man for SmackDown. So that was nice. But, as I said, from here on, it was only going to get better. He feuded with Randy Orton, Kurt Angle. He had a lot of good stuff from here on. But this year, it was just about setting the Dead Man up for his future. It was really just about, okay, what are we going to do with him? How are we going to set him up? It was basically them trying to figure out how they were going to go about the character. And it worked, you know? Like, after this, as I said, he was going all out. He had a great run. So, yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of The Undertaker's return as a Dead Man? Please comment down below. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the last right and like button, or perhaps the tombstone pile driver and the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.